is Maryland, and one of the many, many people who helped make this event come together.
Thank you all for coming out. My name's Ashley Olson. I'm the Administrative Director with the League of Women Voters, and I also served on the Redistricting Commission for the Governor. Okay, and so our coalition, as you know, is Team the Gerrymander. We've been made up of Common Cause and League of Women Voters of Maryland. This year we were joined by Noble Labels Maryland. You want to give them a round? And then gerrymander.org, or on Facebook they're known as No More Gerrymandering in Maryland. And so we're happy to have them as a part of our coalition as well.
So 3 years ago, you may remember we did the Gerrymander Meander 1, although I don't think any of us knew it would be 1 at the time. And in that event, we took a van full of runners and we did a relay run around District 3. Took us 3 days. The Lieutenant Governor was kind enough to speak at the finish to a bunch of very exhausted runners, myself included. And that meander, we really do believe, helped start driving a new level of attention to just how tortured our district lines truly are. When one congressional district goes from Towson through Baltimore, all the way down to Montgomery County, through Columbia on the way, over to Annapolis, it was eye-opening even for me. But this year, 3 years later, we decided to do something a little bit easier on all of us and do a restaurant tour. And today's event is another way of looking at how our faulty district lines slice and dice through our neighborhoods and our counties. Who would have thought that within 13 miles due north, nearly due north in Baltimore, you would go through 4 different congressional districts in just 13 miles. And that's what today's event is going to do. We're starting here in District 3. We'll travel just a few miles up the road and magically be in District 2. Just another short hop, we're in District 1. And then a stone's throw from there, we're in District 7. And if you really dig into the lines, we could have done the 13 miles in a way that would have taken us across district lines 7 times, because the districts really are that tortured through this part of the state. And so that's one of the real penalties of gerrymandering, is that our counties are divided, our neighborhoods are divided, and it's something we just have to fix now. Well, so I'd like to turn it over to Lieutenant Governor. As I mentioned, he was out there 3 years ago at the finish line of the first meander, and we've been so grateful to the administration's leadership on redistricting reform, convening a commission, driving this issue forward, keeping it in the press, keeping it relevant, and trying to make a difference. So thank you so much for being here today.
As Jennifer just mentioned, 3 years ago, I was a candidate with Governor Hogan, then just Larry Hogan, citizen. And we stopped through. I didn't do the running because I'm not a runner. I used to run track, and I decided after that I'm not running after anything. Just if a dog chases me or something, that's about it. But, you know, we set out originally, and we still are doing it now, to really have a bipartisan and open form of government. And we've been trying to do that over the last several years. And one of the initiatives, one of the first initiatives, was addressing the gerrymandering issue. I live in the 3rd Congressional District, and I think this is the 3rd Congressional District. Everywhere is almost the 3rd Or at least you can touch it pretty quickly. I mean, our districts are so carved up in a way that you really are denying people a full voice in the government process. There was a recent court case, I think a 3-judge panel right down the road in Baltimore. We're in Baltimore, probably still in the 3rd District. Talked about the motives, characterized the motives behind the drawing of the districts as a nefarious activity. This was just recently. And that doesn't go back to 2011 when they called the 3rd District a broken-winged pterodactyl lying prostrate across the state map. That's a lot. That shows creativity to come up with that. But when you think about the 1st District, to go from one end of the district to the other, from Snow Hill on the shore to Tawnytown, is 175 miles. You know, you could go from Snow Hill to North Philadelphia in less than that. So, I mean, it just shows that they've really carved this map up. And just talking about Baltimore County and driving through a number of the towns, and you cross over 4 district lines, just talked about the 3rd district. It really takes away the voice of the people, and it's all done to protect jobs of people who are already there. And quite frankly, you know, this is one of those issues that it doesn't matter what party you're in, people agree on this. It's, you know, it's rare, particularly in Washington, that you get both sides to agree. And some would argue, including myself, is that gerrymandering is part of that problem. Because what has happened is they've drawn the districts so only the most active and most ardent on both sides are putting people in. And so of course they're going to get in fights. You don't have those people who are in the middle who are trying to address the issues and concerns of their community from the vast majority of their community, but also understanding those who may disagree. And so this is something that we've been pushing the last 3 years. We've had legislation the last 3 years. The first year the commission was put together, and thank you for being on the commission. Walter, thank you also for being on the commission. We will introduce it again. And then last year the legislature, I guess understanding that this is an important issue for Marylanders, they put together what we sometimes call a phony redistricting piece of legislation where they said 5 other states have to do it first before we can have a nonpartisan redistricting. It's kind of like when you were kids and you say, well, if you do it first, I'll do it. In this case, it's more of if 5 strangers do something, I may do it. So, you know, fortunately the governor vetoed that. I don't think they're going to try to bring that back up because then they have to defend the indefensible. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here again this year. Please keep up the efforts. We're going to keep working at it. And you know, this isn't a partisan issue. The Republicans in some states do just as crazy stuff as the folks did in this state. The 3rd district, though, is worse than any of the others. But we all have been doing that, and it's time to stop it. And many other states have. Florida and California have already done it, and a number of other states have gone to a nonpartisan redistricting process. And so it's, what are we waiting for? So thank you very much. Thank you again for having me.
And so as you heard, Walter joined me on, led with the Redistricting Commission for the Governor. He was a co-chair. He is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, and he's here to say a few words about our experience and his knowledge of gerrymandering and redistricting reform as well.
Thank you, Ashley. I should mention that gerrymandering and redistricting reform is a big Maryland issue. It is also a national issue. And of course, one way that it's a national issue is that if you took the Maryland districts, they would stretch from Atlantic to Pacific and from Canada to Mexico if you ironed them out. But the fact is that Maryland is now in the national eye as one of the worst, or even the worst, examples of a problem that the whole country is going to have to deal with, and that California, Arizona, and some other enlightened states out west have begun dealing with. Ashley mentioned our work on the Maryland Redistricting Reform Commission. It is Governor Hogan following through on one of the most important promises, I think, of his campaign. He pulled us together as a bipartisan group, very much driven by the ideas that Ashley and the League of Women Voters, that Common Cause and other reformers have been working on for years and years and years. This is not a new issue for them, and I'll get back to thanking them in a minute. But that meant that we had some of our agenda already in place because they had done the groundwork and the legwork beforehand. We could add, however, hearings around the state, and boy, did we ever get an earful when we asked ordinary people involved in county politics and city and town politics around the state, how did redistricting affect them? We heard about how difficult local politics becomes when you can no longer tell people what districts they're in because it's too confusing. We heard about how money takes a bigger role when door knocking has to take a smaller role because you can't send out teams if they're not going to stay in the same district. We heard again and again that the lines are there for the politicians' benefit, and how demoralizing, how dispiriting this is for those who are thinking of getting into politics for the first time. It seems to symbolize that the whole process is about something other than the public welfare. Well, I am very proud that we came up in record time with a blueprint for citizen-based redistricting based on ideas from Ashley and others, which drew some of the best from the pioneering plans in Arizona, California, and elsewhere, would go even further in one respect, which is our plan would create a citizen redistricting system in which elected officials would have no say, zero say, in who got on the eventual panel to pick the lines. It would also enforce strong neutral principles of compactness of districts, of keeping counties and cities together where possible, and so forth. And I'm also proud that when we sent it to Governor Hogan, with only a few minor housekeeping changes, that is what he chose to turn into his legislation in the term since then in the legislature. Now, as we know, the story gets bumpy at that point because they were not as thrilled with the plan as every newspaper was and every citizen group and as the various people. That's the one group that didn't like it was the incumbent leadership of the legislature, but unfortunately they are in a roadblock position. And the first whole year, they refused to give us even a committee vote. They refused to let it out for a vote. The second year, they still did that. They still refused to give it that kind of vote. But they were getting more and more embarrassed. And this is an ongoing process of embarrassment, which will lead to their faces getting, I think, redder and redder. But they decided they had to do something. And so they came up with this 6-state plan that Lieutenant Governor Rutherford was, well, 5 plus us.
Oh, 5 plus, right.
Now, I don't know how many of you remember Dr. Doolittle and his stories. And remember the most magical animal was the push-me-pull-you, which could almost starve because it had heads at both ends. And it would try to eat this tuft of grass and it would eat that. Now imagine a 6-headed push-me-pull-you. And imagine that you're going to rely on that animal to get you to the complicated state, and getting true reform, as the Western states have found out, requires a lot of detail work. Imagine that they all have to do it the same way, or else it sits there and starves for lack of being able to get at the grass to eat it. Well, this is such a silly plan that it didn't take much time to argue against it. It falls of its own weight. So I mentioned that it was a national issue. It's a national issue in part because the courts, the federal courts, are taking a good, close look at what's happening. Lieutenant Governor Rutherford mentioned the Maryland case, and according to the coverage over the past week, where they just had a hearing, the court may rule as early as this week about whether to grant relief to the petition. People are really keeping their eyes, though, on the U.S. Supreme Court, because it was only a few weeks ago that the court took a case called Gill versus Whitford about the Wisconsin gerrymander. Now, the Wisconsin gerrymander, I don't have to go into its details, just imagine how bad the Maryland one is. You got it. They were doing all those same things, and for all those same reasons. The parties happened to be flipped. It was the Republicans doing all the nonsense for all the bad reasons. But that case was a little ahead of the Maryland case, and that case has just been accepted by the U.S. Supreme Court. One of the possibilities with the federal court in Baltimore is that we will wind up with the Maryland case, on appeal or otherwise, being graduated up to being a so-called consolidated sister case with Wisconsin. So that's one of the several possibilities, in which case, next spring, the Supreme Court could be handing down the landmark national ruling for the Wisconsin and Maryland gerrymanders together. I don't know how it will come out. It may depend on what Anthony Kennedy ate for breakfast that morning. But what I do know is that for the next year, pretty much the next solid year, the whole country will have their eyes on gerrymandering. The whole country will be discussing an issue that has gone without enough discussion for too long. And here is the point at which I want to thank all of you, because it is your organizations that have kept the visibility of this issue high, that have kept them from being able to bury it and sweep it under the rug. Thank you so much for this event and for all that you've done in the years before. When that national attention comes, they will find something special about Maryland, because a few years ago, Chris Ingram of the Washington Post did an article. There are mathematical formulas by which you can tell how extreme a gerrymander is, how crooked the lines are, whether it's more like a praying mantis or just a bedbug in shape. And so Ingram ran it through like 4 different mathematical formulas, and he concluded that Basically, there were only 2 states left in the ring for the name of worst gerrymander in the country. One of them was North Carolina, where the Republicans did it, and one of them was Maryland. Now, that's where it stood 3 or 4 years ago. Since then, the federal courts in North Carolina have struck down as unlawful both of the North Carolina maps. So it leaves us alone. King of the Hill. We're number 1. And we shouldn't be. Thank you for helping to do something about it.
Thank you both. So this is the first stop in today's meander. This is also the first, mile in the marathon for reform that we have ahead. There is an unprecedented momentum. You heard about the court case. You heard the legislature pass something with the name Redistricting on it, which we were very pleased that the governor, didn't let that bill stand. But the fact that something passed on redistricting in the first time in decades shows that the pressure we're building, your voice, the excitement out there for reform is starting to tip that wave. And we are starting to see a real window for change here in Maryland. No other state has done redistricting reform through their legislature, which isn't too surprising. It's like asking the NFL players to rewrite the rules of football while they're in the middle of the Super Bowl. It's scary, and we don't blame them for being a bit scared of that. Every other state has done it at the ballot box. Maryland doesn't have that option. So we could be the first, not just for having the worst map, but also be the first for taking it on the head and fixing it through our legislature and saying enough is enough, and this is going to stop, and it's going to stop here. And that's what we're hoping tonight will help push us towards. All of you have petition cards at your table. Please fill it out so that we have your contact information. It's so important that we can call you when the legislative session starts, when the governor introduces his bill again, when there's other opportunities for you to come out and testify or be heard. We need to keep your energy, through these hot summer months into the winter and keep building for reform. And we're also planning some policy forums in the fall to pick up on some of the work that the commission did, to look at what other states are doing, and to get another chance for people to have their voice, because we do hear from the legislature, but we're still not hearing enough from people. So we say, fine, we'll keep that going.
I can throw in one more thing I forgot earlier, which is the Maryland Redistricting Reform Commission, actually is in my group, is planning 2 more hearings, which are likely to be this fall, one in Montgomery County, one in the city of Baltimore. Please, please, please come out to those, speak your piece, tell your friends about it. Your voice will really be magnified to our hearings.
So as you know, we're on this meander to draw attention to redistricting reform and why gerrymandering is such a huge issue throughout the nation, but also here in Maryland. And we want Maryland to act on this issue now. We want to make every vote count. Every vote matters. It doesn't matter your affiliation. This is a bipartisan issue throughout the nation. But here in Maryland, we want to make a move. We want to be first. We want to say every voter in Maryland matters, right? And I think there's momentum for this now. Like, we are seeing that people are paying attention now to these political games and these political tricks, and they're saying no more. And this is just one more of those things. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing your support. You guys well know the need for this. And our speaker here at this location at Tark's Grill, Senator Brochin, knows a lot about this issue as well. And he's going to share a few words about his experience and his thoughts on this. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. This is like a hard place to stand somewhere.
Yeah.
My back is to somebody, so I'll try to turn around as much as I can. So I'm Jim Brochin. I'm the senator from the 42nd District. So let me tell you what the 42nd District used to be, and let me tell you what it is right now. And I apologize for the attire. I'm running countywide, which is kind of cool because I don't have to worry about a gerrymander district running countywide. It's just Baltimore County, and I was thinking they can't gerrymander Baltimore County for me when I run, which is a good thing. So my district. So I first ran for office in 2002, and this whole story, which won't take too long, kind of exemplifies how outrageous the system is. So I'm running in 2002. And I'm running then, which is called the 7th Legislative District. And Paris Glendenning in 1998 had drawn this outrageous map to punish his enemies and reward his friends. And the map from 1998, or from 2000, for the 2002 election, my house was in the 7th Legislative District, and my house was in Hampton. and Hampton is just north of Goucher College, just north of the mall in Towson, everybody knows about. My district had Towson, went into Cockeysville, and then kind of veered right and picked up some parts of northern Baltimore County, and veered right and picked up Middle River, some parts of northern Baltimore County, and then went into Harford County and picked up Abington and everything in Harford County up to the Bel Air line. This was the 7th legislative district. So Towson, Middle River, Essex, like Towson, like Middle River and Essex, I went into a Towson, and then into Harford County. Glendenning now says 20 years later what a mistake it was and how he hates gerrymandering, but he's the guy who drew this map. And I decided to run at this time against Andy Harris, who represents this district, because I didn't believe that Towson exemplified the same values as Andy Harris did. I'm a conservative Democrat. Fiscally, I've always thought we should live within our means, and I vote fairly conservatively on fiscal and tax issues, but I'm very liberal on the environment and open space and things like that, and I thought my views represented Towson a lot more than now Congressman Harris's represent. So I'm campaigning, I'm door knocking. I decided to start door knocking in 1999 for a 2002 election, because this is a Republican district, I'm a Democrat, and I've got my work cut out for me. So I door knocked for 2.5 years. And I'm standing at the Giant in New York and Ridgely campaigning. I'm door knocking in Abington, right at the Bel Air line. I mean, I am killing myself on days that are at least 8 or 9 degrees warmer than today. And 3 months before the election, I'm out campaigning one night, and I get a call on a Friday night, and it's from one of my campaign strategists. He says, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" He said, "The Court of Appeals threw out Paris Glendenning's map. It's totally outrageous. It's considered gerrymandering. You have a new district." I said, "What's my district?" They said, "Well, you're in Harford County, right?" He goes, "Don't worry about Harford County anymore." He said, "Your district is solely Baltimore County, and you gave up your Harford County districts for 3 precincts in Pikesville." Well, lucky me, I'm Jewish, I grew up in Pikesville. Talk about flipping the coin right. I went to high school at Pikesville High, and Pikesville High was in my district, so I'm like, wow, this is good. I hope all my friends' parents remember me from 30 years ago. So, literally, in July, I'm door knocking for a November general election. I go through 4 days where no one's running against me. Harris, incidentally, is not in the district that got redrawn. He is 7 miles north, still in the 7th. My district has been redrawn to the 42nd legislative district. Just as an aside, 4 years after that, I run into Chief Judge Bell, who he and the other Chief Justices, he and the other Justices of the Court of Appeals are the ones that throw out Glendenning's map. They throw out his map, and they drew this. I run into Bell at a social function. I said, "You know," I said, "I owe my Senate seat to you." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You redrew the lines and got me out of the 7th. I would have never won the 7th. It would have been close, but Harris would have beaten me. And you redrew the 42nd. He said, "Let me tell you something." He said, "You know how long it took us to redraw Paris Glendenning's map and make it correct and fair and contiguous and compact and follow what the Constitution of the state of Maryland says? You know how long it took us to redraw the entire map of the state of Maryland?" I said, "How long?" He said, 20 minutes. He said, "That's how long it took us." He said, "We brought professional map makers in, we were fair, and we did it based on the Constitution and the law, continuous and compact. We didn't divide communities, and that's what we did." So I run in the new district in 2002. I kind of shift gears. I never stopped knocking. 60% of the district I had been door knocking was still there. So all the work I had done in Timonium, which is very Republican state. And I continued door knocking. And I pull a stunning upset. I'm the first Democrat to represent Towson since 1952 in the Maryland Senate. And I become the senator for the 42nd district. We won 24,000 to 23,000. And I represent my district in a way that I think is fair. And through the years, during the O'Malley years, I become very disenchanted with all the tax increases that my Democratic governor is doing. I thought, the social issues, same-sex marriage, the environment, the Chesapeake Bay I'm supporting, but nickeling and diming every Marylander on every tax out there, on raising the tolls on the Fort McHenry and the Harbor Tunnel for poor people on the east side of Baltimore County, and the Bay Bridge and others. And I thought it was unnecessary. And I think it's not to get into party politics, because it's really the last thing I play. I think it's the downfall of the Democratic Party when they keep raising taxes and fees all the time. I think living within our means is something that almost everybody in this room does, and I try and do. So I'm supporting O'Malley when I think he's right, and opposing when he's taxed up when he's wrong, and it's time for redistricting again. And Martin O'Malley is going to take revenge on me for voting against way too much of this stuff. And he decides to redraw the 42nd district in the census. He redraws it. The northern part of my district is York and Cranbrook. Again, I'll give you a landmark because everybody gets food. Everybody know where the corner stable is? That wonderful, the ribs, the corner stable. Okay, see hands go.
Ribs.
Right, it's in Cockeysville. That's where the northern part of my district was. That was the 42nd. He decides to get me out of the Senate because I haven't been as good a use to the party as I should be. And they decide to make the northern part of my district Pennsylvania. Okay? So the 42nd district used to stop at York and Cranbrook. It now stops in Pennsylvania. And they decided that 3 out of every 4 of my voters were going to be Republicans. And that even in the middle of my district where there's an apartment complex by Delaney High School, these apartment complexes that are Democrats, they reach in there like a big arm going into my district. If you see the map, and that's the 11th. They give that to the 11th. So they strategically extract every Democrat out of my district, every single one. And we door knock. It's very hard to door knock in North County, but a school issue helped us get in front of a lot of people. We form the right alliances. We knock till the end. We have a general election against Andy Harris's best friend. It goes on and on in politics. He's another anesthesiologist, runs against us on Larry Hogan's ticket. Larry Hogan gets 74% of the vote in the 42nd district, and I win 51.5% to 48.5%. The point of this whole story, other than the fact that we know how to run campaigns and we know how to win, is this. Even when we benefited from redistricting when we were campaigning in the 7th to the 42nd, the first thing I did was reach out. Incidentally, I had 3 Republican delegates from 2002 to 2006, and in every election since I've had at least 2 Republican delegates, who I work very well with. I do not do party. I just think it's a total waste of time, and I think the party system is really the downfall of America, to be honest with you. I really What I did when I got elected the first time is I reached across to John Trishler, who was my Republican delegate, who's a fine man who served 1 term, and in 2004, when it benefited me, I put in a bill similar to Larry Hogan's bill, which said that politicians shouldn't be picking their voters, that voters should be picking their politicians. We put it in 2004, legislative redistricting reform. We did it in 2005, 6, when I had new delegates, when Alan Kittleman, I know somebody from Howard County here, Alan Kittleman, who's my friend, put in...
Is your friend?
Yeah, a very good friend. I told you, I don't do party. and Alan Kittleman and I put in bipartisan legislation to let commissions pick this and keep it out of the politicians' hands. And every time along the way, in the beginning, we at least got a vote. And the vote would be 9-2 against, 10-1 against. As we put in legislation moving forward, it got worse. Larry Hogan becomes governor a few years ago. I reach out to the governor, and believe me, the governor and I are not together on every side, okay? I mean, I think the governor is dead wrong on the latest issue, which is the appointments thing, that these appointees should be paid. I sit on executive noms as an aside, and the power of advice and consent in the Maryland Senate is just like the United States Senate. If we don't like his appointees and we don't vote to confirm them, he can't circumvent the Constitution, reappoint them, and then get them paid if we put in the budget language that he can't. So Larry Hogan and I don't agree on everything. But what we do agree on, overwhelmingly, is this. This is a bad system. It's a system that favors the worst side of politics. And at the end of the day, what the governor is doing is he's giving a gift to the Democratic legislature, and they should take advantage of it. This is a once-in-a-generation lifetime, okay? The Republican governor in this case is doing an altruistic thing. Even if you're the most partisan Democrat in the world, I know some are and some aren't, okay? He's giving Democrats in the state of Maryland a chance and a gift. And the chance is to do it the right way, to make sure that my district, that Towson doesn't belong with Harford County, and that Middle River doesn't belong with Towson, and that the people in Hereford, where there are more cows and chickens than there are people, that they have different values than the people in Towson. And yet I represent both areas. I do the best I can, and I love my new district. Believe me, I mean, they're all Republicans, they're all great people, and I mean that seriously. Or at least 99% are. It's beautiful up there. It's God's country up there. But you want communities that share same values, that have things in common, so your representative can make more clear-cut votes and represent its constituents better. It's very hard if a bill comes in that has to do with farming or has to do with pesticides to make a decision. And I'm an environmentalist, so I vote against that quite often. But when the farmers come to me and say one thing in Hereford, and the environmentalist comes to me in Towson, who don't have any farms to say the other, I got to listen even closer because I got to make a decision, and the decision, you're going to have a split district. And in my district, there are a lot of decisions that are split right down the middle, 50-50. And I make my decisions based on public policy. So people know I do it because I'm not an ideologue, and I didn't do it because of the party, or I didn't do it because of the campaign contribution. But we need districts where you pick us rather than we pick you. And that's my story. I am really, for a while, when I started this years ago in 2004, I thought I was by myself. And it was just like me and my Republican delegate. And then when Alan and I put stuff in, we always, having the committee shut us down. But you're part of a movement. And the best advice I can give you before I take any questions is this. The only way to change things is to take you and your friends and everybody who believes what you believe and go down to Annapolis when the hearings come this time and the governor puts it in again. And I will promise you I will be on the governor's bill again. And to take it to the committees and to find people who were on the, in Senator Conway's district, who's the chairman of the AHEA, the person who's dealing with it in the House, and the delegate can tell me who.
The House is rules.
It goes to the Rules Committee?
Yes, the Rules Committee.
That's bizarre. I don't think I've ever heard that one before. But well, then to take it to the Speaker, and to take it to the Speaker's office, and to find constituents of the Speaker, and to find constituents of Senator Conway's and other people on the committee. The delegate is Senator Ed Riley. I serve with that. He's a very decent guy. And to find constituents who believe like him and bring it to committee members so committee members put pressure on leadership. But at the end of the day, the pressure has to start with leadership, and you got to get leadership to budge. Larry Hogan, I'm telling you, is giving a gift to the state of Maryland, a gift to the Democrats for all of you who are Democrats. Because remember one thing. If he wins re-election, and if I were in a casino right now, I'd put my money on him right now, whether you like it or not. If he wins re-election, a lot of Democrats are going to be very, very unhappy with the map he's going to draw. Because then he turns partisan, and why shouldn't he? He's trying to do what's right now, and if they say no and the Democrats in the legislature and the leadership reject him, then why shouldn't he do what he has to do? So with that, I thank you very much for having me, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So obviously Senator Rochen's tale brings up two different things that are key, and it's the idea that you can use gerrymandering to harm people in your own party. It's not just a partisan thing, it's for anybody. And we're meandering through congressional districts, but this all happened in legislative districts, right? So it's not just the 3rd district, it's not just congressional districts, it's not one party or another party, and it's not just in Congress. So anyway, there are lots of reasons why we need to make a fairer system.
We're also returning here from Delegate Mike Malone, my personal delegate from down in Crofton. Very happy to have him here. And we're both Annapolis Striders members, so it's nice to see him when I'm not covered in sweat and wearing running clothes after the race.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Malone. I'm a delegate from Anne County, District 33. And first of all, Jennifer is much faster than me. Yesterday, they had a 1-mile run, and 3 of my family members participated. And I put up the Facebook post, and the Facebook post I put up was, everybody in my family medaled. My wife won her age group, my 9-year-old son won his age group, and my 12-year-old daughter won her age group, and I finished a lot. What I'm going to talk to you about is why this group is so important, because you can be successful. In 2002, Governor Glendening tried to divide my neighborhood in half. I lived in a neighborhood called Four Seasons in the Gambrel-Odenton area of Maryland. And Governor Glendening at that time wanted to draw part of the state legislative district to run all the way down to College Park, which is not close. It's a very different type of neighborhood. And then to have another part of the neighborhood stay within Anne Arundel County. Furthermore, Governor Glendenning at the time also tried to gerrymander part of northern Anne Arundel County to have districts over the Key Bridge into Dundalk, which is also a very different community. Both great communities, but different. And imagine trying to be an elected representative, trying to do door to door, and what are you going to do? Walk over the Key Bridge to get to, the next precinct? It doesn't make sense. And to prove this point, I have some flyers. And this was just put together by homeowners association members who were frustrated with how the lines got drawn. So we rallied together and we started working to have our voice heard. And the result also was a lawsuit, like Maryland has a lawsuit going on right now. In the federal courts, there was a lawsuit in the Maryland courts which took place in the Maryland Court of Appeals. And the hearing was held, I think, on June 10th. This is dated June 11th of 2002. And I was asked, because I wouldn't say I don't necessarily like to speak, but it doesn't bother me. By trade, I'm an attorney, I'm a litigator. So I was asked to speak on the courthouse steps. And although courts aren't supposed to necessarily, step hand in hand with public opinion, they do listen to public opinion, especially when it's good policy. And to me, our goal to end gerrymandering is no-brainer good policy. So it's important for this group to maintain the momentum, to support a bipartisan committee to select our elected representatives. So the voters are selecting the representatives, not the representative selecting the voters. This is the same line drawing that went on that Senator Brochin talked about at the last stop. For him it benefited him, but for many it doesn't. And what it does on a state level is the same thing it does on a federal level. It forces, the districts to be very polarized, just as you just mentioned. It forces, in my district, District 33, I'm a Republican. Candidly, a Democrat hasn't won that race since a woman by the name of Marcia Perry, who's a great lady. I went to high school with her son. And sadly, the district lost her voice. I didn't necessarily agree with Marcia's views. She has some views that I don't agree with, but Marcia was intellectually honest, and it would have been nice to maybe have her voice have a chance to be elected. There's no chance. The way it's currently set up in Maryland on the state legislative districts, you can have a 5% swing in population. So what they did with District 33 is, it's actually one of the largest districts in the state because of the 5% swing, which when you flip it from both sides, really is a 10% swing. And it means it's very difficult. It also means you're going to create very, polarized views, because that's what the voters want, because that all one type of voter has been shoved into the districts. Now, we have a lawsuit going on, which is very much the same idea. It's saying when you draw the lines to basically force folks that have maybe a significant view, if you draw the lines effectively, you can actually cut out the majority, because you just draw them so that you create, in Maryland, you create 7 majorities, and then you create Andy Harris's district, and you put all the Republicans in there, and then you chop it up so everything else is cut differently. So this hurts both Republicans and Democrats, and most importantly, it hurts good policy. It hurt. I got involved in politics because I really wanted a 2-party state. Why do I want a 2-party state? So we have some intellectual honesty, so we have some good debate, and those things are put forth. I have very conservative views, but I respect other views. In particular, this lawsuit, I wasn't a plaintiff, I was the spokesperson. Who was the plaintiff in this lawsuit? First of all, there were several, but my wife was one of the plaintiffs, and my wife is a Democrat. Trust me, I listened to her views. So, I encourage everyone to stay involved. This is important. It's important for Maryland. It's important for our nation. The idea that we have to make this compact with 5 other states that's mentioned before, I mean, that's like, fortunately, my son drove all the way back from Morgantown, West Virginia. He's working just about 5 miles from here, but he drove back early and we affect his future. We affect Jonathan's future. And we got to bring an end to this. We got to have better policy in Annapolis. We got to have better policy in Washington. So stay involved. I thank Jennifer. I thank Common Cause. And keep working. Stay behind this. It's extremely important.
And the league.
And the league. And the league. By the way, my family, please, I hope everyone gets t-shirts. Because I got 6, but you got a new t-shirt, Jonathan. We got 6, so I thank the league for doing the t-shirts and all the support. I thank No Labels and Gerrymander. So thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you for inviting me to speak. Have a great Sunday afternoon. Enjoy your next stop.
All right, welcome to District 7. Here we are at the end of this meander. Maybe it's been a little weird, maybe it's been a little crazy, maybe it's just been fun.
It's been fun.
All right, so thanks for coming along with us. We're so happy to see so many of you out on this important issue of redistricting reform. I think that Jennifer wanted to say a few words of thanks as well.
Well, I just wanted to thank again all the staff who helped make this happen and all the folks who've been getting on our weekly coalition calls. It's been a lot of work to get us here. So, I mean, if you can just raise your hands. I see some people scattered all around, but
there were a lot of people that took part in making this all come together.
Ashley, of course.
The van drivers.
Yes, a huge thanks to our van drivers. It's been a really great day. We're so grateful for all the people who have been along this whole meander with us. It's been a lot of fun to explore the county and 4 different congressional districts along the way.
Yeah. So what we want to do right now is we kind of want to open things up to you. We want you, I think Jennifer told you about it at the last stop, we want to hear from you and see what you want to do in 2018, what you want us to do, what you feel you've learned from this event, and what you want to know more about. We do have a special guest here who lives in Montgomery County. He's a political correspondent for Voice of America, and he's going to share a few words about his thoughts on redistricting in Maryland. And welcome, Michael Williams.
Right. Thank you, and thank you, Ashley, for asking me to do this 6 minutes ago. And so I do work for Voice of America. I do the flagship political show for Voice of America on the English language side. It's called Issues in the News. It's a once-a-week show that's about basically the front page of the New York Times, the 5 or 6 issues of that week that might happen to be important. As you can imagine, we have a limited amount of time, that half an hour to talk about things. So we get into the things that are sort of have the sizzle of the day. And, you know, of course, we're talking about POTUS and his, should I say antics? Is that the right word to use? Escapades, what have you. We talk about North Korea, all the things that are large subjects. But when we talk about democracy, these are the issues that we need to be talking about. As Ashley said, I live in Montgomery County. I grew up in D.C., Washington, D.C., born and raised in Washington, D.C., and then we moved to Montgomery County. I only have a couple minutes here. I don't want to take a couple minutes, but I was looking and doing my notes. I'm not going to talk to you about being enthusiastic about this issue. I'm not going to talk to you about the inner workings of this issue. I tried to do that once with her and ended up with skid marks all over. She just knows just everything about it. She was bebopping and scatting all over the place. So you guys know about it. You're passionate about it. So I'm not going to convince you that this is an important thing. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about why it's important to me. And the one reason that most hits home emotionally for me is the fact that on this past Wednesday, we buried my father at Arlington National Cemetery. My father came from segregated South Carolina along with on the same train as my mother on the same day, them not knowing they were on the same train. They met on a streetcar at Maryland Avenue a couple of years later, and a family was born. My father served for 49 years in the State Department. When he retired, they said that Thomas Jefferson had been his first boss, which is probably true. He worked for 25 years in the United States Army, and he served this country with honor. He helped to start the Equal Employment Opportunity Department across the federal government. His mission in life was fairness. His mission in life was that people needed to have a voice, that people needed to be heard, and heard fairly and heard properly by their duly elected representatives or appointed representatives or what have you. But he had gone through much and been too far to let anybody within his purview not be represented properly. And I think that this organization and this event and these new people, this issue, it speaks to the legacy of his life. We just laid him to rest. He was a man who did not stop working till the last day of his life for equality so that we don't have, what's the effect called? The wasted vote effect? I did a little study. And again, you guys know more about it than I do. But to me, as someone who works for something called the Voice of America, to hear something in America that exists called a wasted vote effect, well, that's a tragedy. So let's be in the business of avoiding tragedy or eliminating tragedy. That's what you're here for. That's what you're doing. My father thanks you for it. I thank you for it. And thank you for letting me speak.